Welcome back everyone to Lost Shrine. In today's episode, I'm sharing 6 creepy true motel encounters from Appalachian small towns, stories that are equal parts eerie and unforgettable. Each one reveals the unsettling reality lurking behind quiet streets and dimly lit motel rooms, the kind of encounters that make you double-check your locks at night. But before we get into it, make sure to subscribe. Hit that like button and share this with anyone who loves a good scare. And I want to hear from you. Tell me where you're watching from in the comments. All right, let's step inside these motels and see what horrors await. I knew I should have pushed through the rain. I kept replaying that thought later, wishing I'd ignored the sheets of water slamming against my windshield and the way the wipers struggled to keep up. If I'd just kept driving, I would have made it home. I wouldn't have turned off at that lonely exit, the one with no name, just a rusted green sign pointing toward lodging. But the thunderstorm wasn't just bad. It was blinding. Lightning cracked so close that my rearview mirror vibrated and the road turned into a dark river. I could barely see my own hands gripping the steering wheel. I told myself I'd only stay for one night, just a place to sleep until morning. The motel appeared like a dying animal huddled on the roadside. A long, single-story strip, each door identical except for the peeling numbers slanted above them. A flickering neon sign buzzed through missing letters. Sailors Rest Motel. The parking lot was half swallowed by weeds. The pavement buckled like something underneath was trying to crawl out. I hesitated, but lightning forked across the sky again and thunder boomed. I didn't have a choice. Inside the office, the air reeked of stale coffee and mold. A bell sat on the counter, but when I tapped it, the sound died halfway through like something swallowed it. A moment later, a man emerged from a doorway behind the desk. Narrow shoulders, drooping eyelids, hair so greasy it looked wet. He didn't say a word, just stared at my dripping jacket like he resented me for bringing the rain in with me. "Room?" I asked, pushing soggy bills across the counter. He slid a key toward me, his hand trembling slightly. "Room 8. His voice was barely a whisper when he finally spoke, like his throat struggled against words. "Checkout's at 11. That was all. No welcome, no warning. Room 8 was near the end of the line, where the roof sagged lowest. When I unlocked the door, the smell hit first. Bleach masking cigarettes, like something much worse had once lived there and needed covering up. The bed sheets were stiff, and the carpet crusted with stains that looked darker in the corners. I was too exhausted to complain. I kicked off my shoes, loosened my soaked clothes, and collapsed. For a while, the storm outside became white noise. Rain hammering the window, wind rattling the rusty air conditioner unit. I drifted in and out of sleep until sometime after midnight when something soft and slow began tapping at my door. I was half awake, confused by the sound. Gentle at first, then louder. No hurried knocking, not someone demanding entry. This was deliberate. Knuckles dragging across the wood between taps. I sat up, heartbeat pounding in my ears. Tap, drag, tap, drag. Someone was out there. I slipped from the bed, feet sinking into the cold carpet, and crossed the room. The chain was latched, the deadbolt locked. Whoever it was, they weren't getting inside. Through the peephole, I expected to see an empty walkway, maybe a tree branch blown loose by the wind. Instead, a woman stood directly in front of the door. She didn't move, didn't knock again, just stared straight ahead, head tilted slightly down, like she was listening through the wood. Her nightgown clung to her skin, soaked through, the fabric sagging as if heavy with water. Her hair hung over her face, dripping, strands glued to her cheeks. The light from the overhang outside flickered, and each time it did, I caught glimpses of her shape, the outline of someone who'd been submerged. My mouth went dry. Hello." My voice cracked. She didn't respond, didn't flinch. The only motion came from water sliding slowly down her arms, dripping onto the concrete. I backed away from the door, heart thudding so loud I thought she'd hear it. I grabbed the room phone, desperate to dial the front desk. But the line was dead. Not static, just nothing. A silent void. When I turned back to the peephole, she was gone. Then the footsteps started. Slow pacing, back and forth across the walkway. The sound carried through the thin wall, wet footprints slapping against concrete. She wasn't leaving. She was waiting. I curled onto the bed, staring at the door until my eyes stung from not blinking. The pacing stopped. Silence followed. The kind that feels like someone holding their breath just inches away. I must have eventually drifted into a restless, terrified sleep, because the next thing I remember was sunlight prying its way through the filthy curtains. Everything looked different in daylight, pathetic instead of frightening. The damp smell was stronger, the paint peeled more noticeably, but the fear from last night didn't fade. It clung to me, chilling my skin. At the front desk, the clerk hardly acknowledged me, his gaze fixed on the countertop. "There was a woman here last night," I said, forcing calm into my voice. "She was knocking on my door. You should check on her. She looked..." The man's head snapped up, eyes wide and bloodshot. His lips pressed into a thin line. "There aren't any women staying here," he interrupted. "Not anymore." "What do you mean, not anymore?" I asked, anger mixing with unease. He glanced around the room as if afraid someone might hear. Then he leaned slightly closer, voice rasping. "We had a lady here, a few years back. Claimed she couldn't sleep. Said the pool kept calling her." I waited, breath held. "One night she went out during a storm." His voice cracked. "We found her floating by the deep end. It was too late." He swallowed hard, eyes glistening. Not with sympathy, but dread. "Sometimes she comes back, trying to check in again, trying the doors." I stared at him, expecting a grin, some sign that he was screwing with me. But he looked dead serious. "There's no pool," I said, bewildered. I hadn't seen one. His expression flickered, like he realized he'd said too much. "We filled it in," he murmured, barely audible. "Didn't matter." That was enough. I walked out fast, practically running to my car. My hands shook when I shoved the key in the ignition, but the engine sputtered and coughed like it might die. I slammed my foot on the gas before it could change its mind, speeding toward the main road. Only when I reached the highway did I finally breathe, tension loosening from my shoulders, just enough for me to notice how drained I felt, as if the night had taken something from me. I checked my mirrors, habit mostly, and froze. She was there, at the edge of the motel's driveway, right where the asphalt met the grass. She stood facing the road. Her soaked nightgown clung like seaweed, hair matted over her face. Water still dripped from her fingertips, pooling around her bare feet. But this time, she was turned toward me, watching. Lightning flashed behind her, illuminating her outline for a split second. And in that brief light, I realized her head wasn't tilted forward like before. It was tilted slightly back, as if she was looking up, following me with her eyes beneath that curtain of hair. I tore my gaze away, focusing on the road, heart rattling against my ribs. Every few seconds, though, some awful compulsion made me check again, sure she'd somehow gotten closer. But the storm swallowed her shape, and eventually she disappeared from sight. I convinced myself I'd imagined her, blamed the exhaustion, the fear, the storm, anything that made it easier to forget. And for a while, I did forget. I got home, I unpacked. I slept in my own bed, safe under my own roof. Days passed. Weeks. Sometimes I thought I heard soft tapping late at night, but I knew it had to be the plumbing or wind or something normal. Until the rain came back. I woke up the first night of the next big storm to water dripping in my hallway. A small puddle forming under something pale standing at the far end. A woman, soaked through, hair plastered to her face, not knocking anymore. She had finally checked back in. I travel a lot for work. Small towns, forgotten highways, motels that feel like someone's grandmother once cared about them and then just stopped. I never thought any of that would get to me. I've slept through fire alarms, drunk couples arguing, even semi-trucks rattling windows. Noise doesn't scare me. Silence doesn't scare me. But that night in Appalachia taught me there's something in between the two. Something alive. I drove into the town just before sunset. One main road, a hardware store, a diner advertising hot coffee and pie, and a tiny motel that could have been charming if its sign wasn't missing half its bulbs. My company booked me there because it was the closest lodging to the facility I needed to inspect. The guy who owned it was older, stiff posture, eyes that scanned rather than looked. He wore a smile like it hurt. "You're lucky," he said as he handed me a key on one of those plastic fobs. Near full tonight. There were 8 rooms total. I figured he was just trying to sound successful. He walked me down the narrow hall with mismatched carpet, cheap floral squares taped and nailed over spots where floods or bad guests must have done their worst. Each door had a number hand-painted above it on a little wooden plaque. Mine was room 5. Right before he reached it, I saw another door. Room 4, but without the plaque. Instead, thick chains were looped through metal brackets drilled into the frame. They were industrial, the kind you'd use to lock up a shipping crate. A huge padlock held everything tight. The paint on the door was cracked, and the bottom looked like something had clawed it. Trying to make small talk, I gestured to it. "That one's out of order?" His shoulders went rigid. "We don't rent room 4, he said. "Why is it still here then?" He just unlocked my door, stepped inside and marched to the window to check the lock. "You'll be comfortable," he said instead. Then, when he handed over the key, he stared a moment too long. "Sleep with the deadbolt on. These old buildings don't always, stay put." I wanted to laugh it off, but he wasn't joking. His face was pale, sweaty, like he'd been holding something in his mouth he wasn't allowed to spit out. After he left, I tried to shake off the weirdness. The room was nice enough. Old quilt, a lamp with a curious burn mark on its shade, the smell of lemon cleaner trying its best to hide mildew. The facility visit that morning had drained me, and all I wanted was to sleep and get this trip over with. Night came fast in the mountains, smothering everything. I lay in bed, scrolling my phone, letting that soft, stale motel quiet close in around me. Around midnight, I clicked off the lamp, rolled onto my side, and waited for unconsciousness. That's when the first thud hit the wall behind my bed. It wasn't pipes. It wasn't settling wood. It sounded like someone hurling their weight against, the drywall, right on the other side of my head. The sound jolted me upright. Another thud, harder, then a scraping, like fingernails or knuckles dragging, then silence again. I waited, heart pounding, holding my breath. I listened so hard my ears rang. A long minute passed. Maybe it was the building, maybe a raccoon stuck in a crawl space. I forced myself to lie back down. The third thud shook the bed frame. I wasn't alone. That realization hit like cold water. I turned the light back on and pressed my ear to the wall. The drywall felt warm. Too warm. I heard breathing, not the deep rhythm of sleep. Something panicked, wet, desperate. Then a voice, barely a whisper. "Don't open the door." I jerked back like I'd been shocked. My throat felt tight, like something wanted to crawl out of it. I stared at the wall. My mind raced. What door? That chained room? Someone was inside. The breathing faded for a bit, and I tried to convince myself it wasn't real. Maybe I'd imagined the words, twisted random sounds into meaning. My brain does that when I'm exhausted. But then the voice came again, closer this time, as though the speaker's lips were pressed to the other side of the wall. "They'll hear you. Don't open the door." I scrambled out of bed, flipped on every light in the room. My reflection in the mirror looked like a ghost. Eyes wide, chest heaving. The thuds stopped. The breathing stopped. Everything stopped. I paced the room, debating whether to call the owner, or maybe the police, or maybe just leave and sleep in my car. But what was I even going to say? There's a voice telling me not to open a door I can't even see from my room. I sat in the chair staring at the deadbolt, making sure it was locked. Hours crawled by. The clock ticked loud enough to drive me insane. Eventually, exhaustion started to win again. The lights stayed on, but I drifted, body and mind disconnected. Then I heard keys jingling in the hallway. I jolted upright. The sound was right outside my door. Footsteps, slow. Someone muttering under their breath, too low to make out. Curiosity beat fear. I crept over and eased one eye to the peephole. The owner stood alone. He wasn't moving toward any other room, only room 4. He leaned close to the chain door, pressed his lips to the crack between the frame and the wood. He whispered, soft, shaky, urgent, like he was praying or negotiating. His fingers trembled around a ring of keys. There was no reply, at least not one I could hear. Then he turned. He wasn't looking at my door, just right into the peephole as if he saw my eyes staring back. His face twisted, terrified, not angry, afraid of me, afraid of what I'd witnessed. His mouth opened like he wanted to say something, but he didn't. He just backed away slowly, headed toward the office, and kept glancing back like he thought the chained door might burst open if he blinked. I stayed awake until dawn, heart racing every time a floorboard creaked. When sunlight finally broke, I packed my bag in seconds. Cold coffee, no shower, just get out. At the front desk, the owner didn't look up as he processed my checkout. "How was your stay?" he asked mechanically, like his mind was far, far away. I slept fine. It was a lie, and he knew it. His jaw clenched. He slid my receipt across the counter and said, "Safe travels." I turned toward the exit, but something made me stop. I looked down the hall one last time. Room 4. The chain was on the floor. Not opened, broken. The metal brackets were ripped out of the frame, twisted like they'd been wrenched apart by something impossibly strong. The door itself hung crooked, a crack wide enough to glimpse darkness inside. The owner followed my gaze. His face went blank except for his eyes. They filled with a raw, hopeless fear. He shook his head slowly, almost pleading with me. Don't say anything. Don't ask. Don't know." I walked out. I didn't breathe until I reached my car. Even then, I couldn't turn the ignition right away. I sat there, staring back at that hallway through the lobby window. No one came out of room 4. No one came after me. I left that town behind, and for a while, I convinced myself it had all been paranoia. Bad sleep, old building noises, tired mind. You tell yourself whatever you need to forget. But I swear, I hear those thuds sometimes when I'm lying awake in hotel beds across the country. I try to ignore the feeling that something followed me, something that remembers the way I pressed my ear to that wall when it told me not to open the door. And sometimes, late at night, for just a second, I think I hear breathing right behind the drywall, and a whisper, "They'll hear you." I was already in the kind of exhaustion that blurs the edges of things when I pulled into that little roadside motel. The drive had been long, longer than it had any right to be, and the strip of highway I'd been crawling along felt like it wanted to spit me off into the trees. It was November, cold enough for frost to slick the world silver, and the mountains around me swallowed every sound except the hum of my engine. The motel's sign flickered. Vacancy, buzzing like an insect in the dark. There wasn't another car in sight, not on the road and not in the gravel lot. Just my headlights cutting through the night and the low building sagging under its own loneliness. I almost kept going. Something about the place made the back of my neck pick up, but the clock on my dash said almost midnight, and I hadn't slept in nearly 20 hours. I told myself sleep was sleep, even if it came in a half-rotting room off a forgotten highway. The front office door rang a little bell when I stepped inside. The smell hit me first, stale coffee and thick dust. The man at the reception desk didn't look up right away. He was hunched over a ledger, glasses perched so low I wondered how they stayed on at all. His skin looked stretched thin, almost waxy in the yellow light. When he finally raised his head, he stared at me too long. Not angry, not friendly, just measuring. His eyes were pale, the kind of pale that doesn't reflect light the way it should. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3. You want a room? He said flat, as if it wasn't a question. Yeah, just for the night. He slid a key across the counter. It was old-fashioned, the kind with a big brass tag. No ID check, no form to fill out. Just the key. But he didn't let go when I grabbed it. His fingers curled around it, cold and stiff, holding it there like he needed me to hear something before he allowed me near that room. Don't open the curtains. I gave him a tired half-laugh, a little confused. All right? His face didn't move. Keep them shut, no matter what you hear. He held my eyes a moment longer before he finally released the key. I swallowed and nodded, telling myself this was just some small-town eccentric with too many rules. Maybe he didn't want people seeing inside the rooms from the road. Maybe this was the kind of place where people paid cash for privacy. I tried to push away the unease prickling under my skin, but it settled into me anyway. Room 7 was on the street side. The door creaked like it hadn't opened in months. Inside, everything looked like a memory of a motel instead of a real one. Faded carpet, a sagging bed, a TV that probably only got static. But the curtains, they were different. Heavy, thick, and completely sealed to the wall on each side with long strips of fabric glued and pinned down. Not a sliver of light could pass through. I was too exhausted to think about it. I kicked off my shoes, lay on top of the covers, and let sleep drag me down. It must have been around 2 in the morning when I woke up. Heart pounding, body stiff, because something had pulled me out of the depths of a dead sleep. At first, I thought it was the wind. The whole building creaked like it was breathing, but then I heard the rustling. Soft, slow, like something brushing against the window from the outside. I convinced myself it was a branch or maybe a plastic bag caught in the breeze. But then came the scrape, a single, long drag across the glass, like a nail. My breath froze in my lungs. Then another, higher this time. A sound that went from one edge of the window to the other. Careful. Testing. I told myself not to move. If I stayed still, whatever it was would lose interest. Maybe it would go away, but I could hear it breathing. Through the wall, through the curtains. Something alive. Too close. I stared at those dark drapes, too heavy to sway from just wind. But they were shifting. The fabric tightened, like something was pressing against it from the other side. And that's when I saw the shadow. A tall shape, taller than any person. its head bent down unnaturally, almost folding itself behind the sealed curtain as it moved. Slow, smooth, no hesitation. I bit down on my own tongue to keep quiet, tasting blood. Then, whispers. Not words at first, just hissing, like a storm of voices pressed together. But then I recognized my name. Clear, drawn out, spoken by dozens of mouths from just outside my window. They knew me. They were calling for me. The doorknob rattled behind me, sharp metal jerks. The deadbolt shook so hard the wood around it groaned. Something scraped along the door too, as if fingernails were dragging downward, slow and purposeful. The voices outside multiplied, overlapping into a sound that throbbed in my skull. My body wouldn't move. Every muscle locked tight. All I could do was stare at the curtains as they pulsed inward and those whispers slithered across the room. Come look. I'm here. Let me see you. Something pressed the fabric hard enough that I could see its handprint. But the fingers were wrong. Too many. Too narrow, and they reached far, stretching up past where any human arm could reach. The window frame creaked, wood bending against pressure. I heard the subtle click of the latch on the other side lifting, like invisible fingers were working it loose. I thought about running. I even pictured myself slamming out the door and sprinting to my car. But then the voices pressed against the door, inside the voices, like they were already waiting. So I stayed locked in that bed, gripping the covers like they were the only thing rooting me to the earth. I didn't breathe, I didn't blink, I didn't dare think. And then it stopped. Not slowly, not fading away, just gone. Silence so total it rang in my ears. I didn't sleep after that. I just watched the room grow a shade lighter as dawn crept in. The only sign that I was still alive and the world still existed outside that nightmare. The second the sun touched the horizon, I stood. My legs shook so bad I thought I'd hit the floor. My hands trembled as I reached for the curtains. I almost didn't open them. Every part of me screamed not to. That if I looked, if I confirmed any of what I thought I heard, the world I knew would never feel real again. But I did it anyway. I yanked the curtains open in one violent motion, like ripping off a bandage. Nothing. Just a cold morning, grass slick with dew, the parking lot empty. The trees beyond still as stone. For almost a minute I let myself believe I'd imagined it all. Stress, exhaustion, a brain half asleep dreaming shapes and sounds into being. Then I saw the dew, not disturbed by the wind, not patchy from footprints or paws, but smeared. Huge, greasy handprints wiped through it. Prints so high on the glass they almost touched the roof. Too high for any person. I didn't think. I just packed my bag, threw the door open, and made a straight line to the office. The night clock was there, but this time he was waiting, standing, as if he knew exactly when I'd walk in. He didn't ask if I slept well, didn't ask if I needed anything. He just nodded. Not proud, not relieved, just acknowledging. You kept the curtains closed, he said, like it was something that mattered. Like it meant something deeper than I could understand. Yeah, I whispered. I heard something. He nodded again. Slow, heavy. They come for anyone who looks, he murmured. Anyone curious, anyone who thinks the dark is empty. I didn't know what he meant. I didn't ask. Because some part of me already knew that whatever pressed up against that window was real, and curiosity was the only invitation it needed. He slid a receipt toward me, even though I hadn't given him a card. Just a blank slip of paper with one word stamped on it. Survived. I didn't take it. I couldn't. My hands were shaking too bad. I left with my heart still hammering, gravel crunching beneath my tires as I sped away from that motel in the mountains that tried to swallow me up. Hours later, even after sunlight filled every inch of the road ahead, A feeling clung to me, a cold certainty. If I'd opened those curtains last night, I wouldn't have been alone in that room, and a voice, low and close, slips into my thoughts sometimes, right before sleep steals me away. Come look, we're still here. We remember your name. I wasn't supposed to be out there that late. The mountain road wasn't meant for driving after dark, especially in a rental car with brakes that squealed every time I touched the pedal. But I'd underestimated the distance between towns, and by the time I realized my mistake, I was already deep into the back roads of Appalachia. Everything around me was just black shapes and the suggestion of trees. My GPS had died 2 hours earlier, so all I had was the thin beam of headlights and the hope that a town sign would appear eventually. That's when I saw it, an old neon tube barely flickering behind a row of crooked trees. Motel. A single building, squat and stretched like a dead worm across a gravel lot. It looked like a place you'd see in a true crime documentary, the kind they mention once before the camera cuts to a family photo with a tragic date underneath. But I was exhausted, and there was nowhere else to go. A small bell chimed as I opened the office door, though the sound was so faint and tired it barely made noise. Inside, everything smelled like mothballs and wood that had rotted too long in one place. A woman came from a back room, thin, elderly, wearing a faded housecoat. Her hair was white but still tangled with what looked like old bits of leaves. "You're traveling late," she said, voice soft but unfriendly. "Yeah, got stuck on the back road. Do you have a room?" She looked me over too long, as if checking for something invisible around my shoulders. Eventually, she nodded and slid an old ledger toward me instead of a computer. I signed my name. The pen scraped like a needle on bone. "Room 5, she said, handing me a heavy brass key. "You'll have a neighbor tonight. He talks in his sleep. Don't pay him any mind." I forced a polite smile. "Sure, I've dealt with worse." She didn't smile back. Her gaze dropped to my signature. Her lips moved silently over my name. I stepped back into the cold. The motel's rooms formed a single line, doors facing the road. Only 2 lights worked, one near the office, one over room 6. The rest were dead or flickering. Room 5 was right beside that last sad glow, half lit and half swallowed by darkness. Inside, the room was serviceable. Stained carpet, a quilt that smelled vaguely like old books, a TV thicker than a suitcase. But at least the heater worked, groaning to life when I turned the dial. I tossed my bag on the bed and wiped a hand across my face, telling myself I could sleep anywhere for one night. That's when I heard it. A voice on the other side of the wall. Slow, like someone struggling to speak underwater. A low mumble that had no words at first, just a rhythm. Broken breaths, then a dragging heartbeat of speech. The woman had warned me. Just sleep talking, nothing to worry about. But something about it made my skin tighten. It sounded wrong, not quite human. I tried to focus on unpacking. I plugged in my phone, winced at the lack of service. I brushed my teeth. I lay down, burying myself under the quilt, and closed my eyes. The voice seeped through the headboard. At first, it was just more mumbling. Then it grew clearer, and clearer still, until I could almost make out words. Then suddenly I could make them out. He was saying a name, my childhood nickname. One I hadn't heard spoken aloud in more than 20 years. One that only 2 people in the world knew, and one of them was buried 6 feet under Kentucky clay. The voice repeated it again and again, slow and wet, as if each syllable dragged through a throat full of water. My heart slammed hard enough to shake my vision. I sat up, staring at the wall. The headboard pressed right against it, wood against wood. On the other side, someone who somehow knew me. Then came a laugh. Soft, broken, too close. A tapping followed, right behind my head. Not random, like knuckles on the exact spot where the headboard touched the wall. Tap, tap, tap. I held my breath. The laughs stopped, the taps continued. I reached for the TV remote. I needed noise, any noise, to drown him out. The screen crackled to life, but no channels worked. Just static. Thick, crawling static that sounded like insects chewing through wires. The tapping changed rhythm. Faster. Like the thing behind the wall was matching its timing to my breathing. I turned off the TV. The room fell into silence. My pulse roared like thunder in my ears. Then the voice said something new, something I hadn't heard since I was 10 years old. Let me in. Not shouted, not whispered, just spoken like a request, like I owed it to him. I scrambled off the bed, clutching my bag. I didn't care if I looked insane, I was leaving. The voice grew louder, following me across the room as if sliding along the wall. Let me in. Let me in. I unlocked the door with shaking hands and burst out into the night air. Cold hit me like ice water. I staggered into the light of room 6's bulb, panting, looking at the building, ready to confront my tormentor. The door to the neighboring room was wide open. Inside, nothing. No bed, no furniture, no sign anyone had ever been staying there. Just one thing. A dark, wet stain on the wall exactly where my headboard lined up. The shape of it looked like something had pressed against the wood from the other side. Something with weight. Something that left moisture behind. I froze, stomach twisting. That stain. It was fresh. The air behind me shifted, like someone exhaling. I turned. The old woman from the office was standing 10 feet away, motionless, her nightgown fluttering slightly in the breeze. She looked at the open room, then at me. "You shouldn't listen when he talks," she said. "Makes him stronger." My voice cracked. Who? Who is he?" She didn't blink. "He follows some people. Not many. Just the ones he remembers." "I've never been here before," whispered. Her mouth bent downward. "That doesn't matter. You've been places he's been." She nodded toward my room. "He noticed you then. He remembers voices best. Names next." I shook my head. He said my childhood nickname." That word seemed to chill her. Her hands pinched into fists. "Leave. Drive until sunrise. Don't stop. Don't look back. If you hear him again, you keep driving faster." She started backing away toward her office, as if afraid even talking about it would carry the voice closer. She disappeared inside without another word. I stood in the gravel, trying to breathe, staring at that empty room. My bag was still in my arms. My keys were in my pocket. Then I heard it. From inside my own room. Tap, tap, tap. Slow, like it had found new wood to knock against. I didn't go back for anything. I sprinted to my car, gravel kicking under my shoes. I slammed the door shut, jammed the key in the ignition, and peeled out of that lot so fast the tires spit stones behind me. The motel shrank in my rearview mirror, swallowed by night. The road ahead twisted and dipped, but I didn't ease my speed, not once. Every time I blinked, I expected to open my eyes and see something sitting in the passenger seat, soaked and smiling. I turned on the radio, just static, no voices. For once, I was grateful. Miles passed. The road curved, trees grew taller, the night stretched on forever. And then, just barely, I heard something under the static. A voice, low, wet, straining. It said my name again, not the one I use, not the one on my license. The other one, the one that was never written down. The one buried in the dirt of a childhood I thought I left behind. I gripped the wheel until my nails dug into my palms. The road buckled as the car drifted. I straightened it, breathing through gritted teeth. "No," I muttered. "No, you're not here. You're not real." The radio hissed louder. The voice came clearer. And then, like it was only inches from my ear, "Let me in." I hit the radio so hard the static cut out. Silence returned. My own breathing sounded alien, harsh. I drove like that until the sun finally broke the horizon, yellow light burning through the fog like salvation. I didn't slow down until I saw the welcome shape of a real town. Gas stations, people, civilization. I pulled over at a diner and stumbled inside. I must have looked wild, eyes bloodshot, clothes wrinkled, hands trembling. I sat in a booth and just stared at the table, trying to believe I was safe. The waitress asked if I wanted coffee. I tried to answer, but my voice wasn't working right, like something had scraped my throat while I slept. Except I hadn't slept. Eventually, I did go home. I locked my door. I slept with the TV on, the volume just high enough to drown out silence. But some nights, when the house settles, when the pipes groan in the walls, I hear tapping, soft, patient, right behind the headboard. And sometimes, I swear, I hear him breathing, slow and wet, like someone still drowning. He only ever says one thing now. He says it every night. Not a question, not a threat, just a reminder. I remember you. I've been putting off telling this. Maybe because saying it out loud makes it real. Maybe because every time I think back to that night, I feel like I'm right back there, my ear pressed to a thin motel door, listening to something breathe on the other side. Something that knew my name. Something that chose me. I was driving alone through the Appalachian back roads, headed toward a weekend hike along the old logging trails. It was off-season, the air wet and cold, the kind of chill that sinks into your bones and lingers. I didn't want to drive any farther in the dark, so I pulled off when I saw the glow of Pine Hollow Lodge, a cheap roadside motel, one level, doors facing the parking lot. The neon vacancy sign flickered like it was struggling to stay alive. Inside, the owner barely glanced up. He slid me the key to room 11, warned me the walls were thin, and went back to staring at a muted TV like it was the only thing tethering him to sanity. The room smelled of damp carpet and a cleaning solution strong enough to burn. But I was tired. I showered, crawled under the stiff sheets, and passed out to the hum of the air conditioner. The first morning I woke to voices outside. A cleaner was moving room to room, knocking twice, then greeting each guest with a cheerful, "Morning, fresh towels." I heard laughter, easy conversation, the kind of sound that makes a place feel normal. But when she reached my door, her footsteps quickened. No knock, no greeting. Just the squeak of her cart's wheels speeding past. I figured maybe the room wasn't due for service yet. I went hiking, came back covered in mud and exhausted, and slept like a dead man. Day 2. She did it again. Knock, knock. Fresh towels. For every room except mine. When she passed, something slid under my door. A folded piece of motel stationery. I opened it lazily, expecting some promo garbage. The handwriting was shaky. "Do not respond if you hear knocking after dark." I stared at it a long minute, waiting for the joke to land. It never did. That evening, I walked to the office and asked about the cleaner. The owner looked irritated I'd interrupted his TV ritual. "She does her job," he muttered. "That's all that matters." "Why is she avoiding my room?" I asked. His eyes flicked to the door. Then, without a word, he turned the volume up. I left more confused than before. The sun dropped early behind the ridge, and with it came the kind of darkness that swallows headlights whole. I locked my door, pulled the curtains shut, and tried to read to quiet my nerves. But every shadow looked like someone standing just out of view. The motel's silence pressed in like a weight. Midnight came. Knock, knock, knock. I froze. The knocks were polite, rhythmic, like someone trying very hard to seem harmless. I waited, heart hammering. Another set of knocks, slightly louder. I swallowed hard and called out, "Who is it?" The knocking stopped. Silence. Long enough that I almost laughed at myself. Then the handle turned. Slowly, carefully. Like whoever was there didn't want to spook me. They just wanted in. I jumped up and threw my shoulder against the door, gripping the lock like my life depended on it. "What do you want?" I shouted. Breathing. Close. Right on the other side. Heavy, wet breathing, the kind that fogs up glass. Then it stopped. No footsteps, no retreat. Nothing. Minutes, maybe hours, passed before I dared move. My muscles ached from bracing the door. Finally, I cracked it open, just enough to peek. The hallway was empty, but the floor, muddy footprints led away from my door, barefoot. The prints staggered, toes dragging like whoever made them didn't quite know how to walk. That's when I saw the corner of something stuck behind my door frame. Another note, smeared with mud. I didn't read it. Not then. I slammed the door, locked it, and shoved the bedside table in front. I lay awake until the first thin light of morning crept through the curtains. At sunrise, I marched straight to the cleaner. She was by the office, wringing her hands, eyes swollen like she hadn't slept. When she saw me, her face went pale. "You opened the door," she whispered. Not a question, a betrayal. I pulled the second note from my pocket. She grabbed it with shaking fingers, read it, then ripped it to shreds. "They pick a new one every season," she said, voice trembling. "Someone to follow, someone to trade places with." "Who?" I asked. "What the hell was that last night?" She looked up at me, and in that moment, I saw something truly broken inside her. The look of someone who remembers something no human should. "Don't stay here," she whispered. "Not tonight. Not ever." I told her I was leaving. She shook her head. "It's too late," she said. "Once they knock, they know you." I didn't wait for more. I packed, threw my gear in the car, and sped out of that parking lot like the ground itself was reaching for my tires. I didn't care where I ended up. I just wanted distance. Hours later, I stopped at a gas station. The attendant asked where I'd come from, and when I mentioned Pine Hollow, he slipped something across the counter, a newspaper clipping, yellowed with age. "Local man vanishes from Pine Hollow Lodge." Below the headline, a blurry photo of a man standing in front of room 11, same old wooden door, same faded number. The article said the missing guest was last heard shouting at someone through his door. Staff claimed they found muddy, barefoot prints leading into the woods behind the motel, but no prints ever came back. "Folks around here say it happens every year or so," the attendant muttered. "Room 11, always room 11. I tried to laugh it off, but my voice died in my throat. That night, I checked into another motel. Brighter, newer, safe. I triple-locked the door and wedged a chair under the knob. I kept every light on, just before sleep finally took me. Someone knocked. 3 slow, polite taps. Not from the hallway. From inside the closet. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. I stayed frozen until morning sunlight spilled across my bed. When I opened the closet, there was nothing. No footprints, no disturbance. But wedged into the crack of the doorframe was a note, scrawled in the same shaky handwriting. "We already chose you." I threw up in the sink. The motel owner must have heard. He came knocking, asking if I was okay. I shoved past him, left the room key on the counter, and drove without looking back. That was months ago. I've switched motels, moved apartments, even stayed with friends. I keep changing locations, thinking maybe I can outrun whatever chose me. It doesn't matter. The knock always comes. Sometimes at the front door, sometimes on a window, once from under the bed. Polite, patient, and I've learned something the cleaner tried to warn me. It doesn't matter if you ignore the knocking anymore, because eventually the handle starts to turn. And one night, when I'm too tired or too slow or too desperate to sleep, I know I'll make a mistake. I'll ask what they want. I'll open the door, and something barefoot and staggering, something that used to be human, will finally step in. Then it'll be my turn to walk barefoot into the dark. I shouldn't have been anywhere near that forgotten stretch of road. I'd left early that morning, chasing the tail end of autumn through the Appalachians, itching for silence and a change of scenery. The air had that damp bite to it. Fallen leaves still clinging to their last bit of color before winter stripped everything bare. When my car sputtered, coughed, and died, I coasted to the shoulder, praying the problem was just a loose cable or something simple. But under the hood, I saw nothing burned or broken. Everything looked fine. It just wouldn't turn over again. I didn't have signal. My phone might as well have been a brick. The highway, if you could call it that, looked like it hadn't seen paving equipment in decades. I waited an hour, maybe two, hoping another car would pass. Nothing. Not even the distant rumble of one. Just wind rolling across the hills, carrying the echo of some unseen creek. By late afternoon, hunger and cold had worn down my stubbornness. I gathered my backpack and started walking, following the road that wound down the ridge toward a faint cluster of lights I'd spotted earlier. It was almost dusk when I reached what passed for a town. A handful of boarded buildings, rust-eaten gas pumps, and a motel too big for a place like that. It stretched in both directions, 3 stories tall, maybe 200 rooms, squatting beside the road like a monument to better days. A neon sign flickered. Vacancy. Below that, in peeling paint, take any room. No one sat behind the dusty check-in counter. The lobby was unlocked, but the floor tiles were cracked and the air smelled like old wood and lemon cleaner. There was a bell on the counter, tarnished, ringed by dust, but pressing it only echoed uselessly through the empty halls. I yelled, "Hello, I need help." My voice bounced back to me, but nothing else. The keys were all hanging neatly on the wall. Tiny brass numbers, every one of them waiting. It didn't feel right, but darkness had settled and the cold was creeping deep into my bones. I grabbed the first key I saw that didn't look corroded. Room 212. The elevator had no power, so I climbed the stairs. Each step creaked like it had a complaint. The hallway was long, too long, stretching into a kind of haze. Every door was closed and dust-free as if sealed shut. Some rooms had little stickers across the latch, unbroken, untouched. My room was perfectly clean. Bed tight as a hospital cot, white sheets crisper, air stale but not foul. The way a place smells when no one lives there. The bathroom was spotless. No rust, no grime. If someone had handed me the room a minute before I walked in, I'd believe them. But there were no signs of anyone else staying there. No luggage carts, no voices through walls, no TVs flickering behind doors. Just me. I showered in lukewarm water, the only warmth I'd found since the sun went down. Afterward, I sat on the edge of the bed, trying again to call for help. Still no signal. I thought sleep would be easy. After that hike, exhaustion should have knocked me cold, but my ears wouldn't rest. I kept listening. For anything. Around midnight, the wind picked up and moaned through the long hallways outside. Something about that sound made me check the deadbolt one more time. The dark had weight to it, thick, pressing against the window. Then came the first noise, a door hinge whining somewhere down the hall. Not slamming, just opening. Slowly. I sat up straight. Footsteps followed. Soft, deliberate, the rhythm of someone barefoot or wearing socks. The sound was faint but clear, moving from one room to the next. Creak. Step. Step. Creak. Step. Step. One door would open, then silence. Then it would close. Then it would happen again at the next room. I told myself it was housekeeping, a night staffer doing something routine. But there were no carts earlier. No workers. No cars outside. My breathing picked up. I pulled the covers to my chin like a child again, ridiculous as it was. The footsteps grew louder, closer, crawling up the hall one room at a time. Whoever it was didn't rush. They inspected, they listened, they moved like they knew exactly which rooms to check. When they reached the room next door, I could hear a pause, like they were pressing their ear against the wall, listening for life, listening for me. That's when I made the mistake of glancing toward the door. The shadow beneath it shifted, a sliver of darkness where a foot might be. Then the knob twitched. The door didn't swing open. It eased open, inch by agonizing inch, as if the person didn't want to disturb me until they were already inside. A silhouette slid into the black of my room. Tall, thin, too thin, shoulders uneven, like bones didn't align properly beneath the skin. It moved with a sickly grace, joints bending in places joints shouldn't. It didn't talk, it didn't breathe loud. It just listened, its head cocked to one side, then the other, trying to locate something in the dark. My breathing, my heartbeat. I shut my eyes tight and willed myself to disappear under the blanket. My lungs burned from the effort of staying silent. After a long moment, so long I counted my pulse to keep from screaming, the entity stepped backward. The hall swallowed its shape again. The door closed quietly, and then the footsteps began once more, moving past my room to the next door and the next after that. Checking, always checking. That was enough. I couldn't stay. I grabbed my backpack and crept toward the window but it wouldn't open, painted shut. My only way out was the hallway, the same path that thing was patrolling. I cracked the door open just an inch. The hallway lights flickered, but I saw no one. The footsteps had moved farther down, maybe near the stairwell. I slipped out and hugged the wall, praying my shoes didn't squeak. When I reached the stairs, I looked back. Down the hall, far away, the tall shape stood perfectly still, facing me. It hadn't been checking other rooms. It had just waited, knowing I'd come out. My stomach lurched into my throat. I bolted. Down the stairs, two at a time, ignoring the burn in my knees. I tore through the lobby, almost slipping on the broken tiles, and shoved through the front doors. Cold air slapped me, but I kept running, across cracked pavement, past empty parking spaces. My car was somewhere up that road, but I wouldn't make it if I slowed down. I didn't stop until the motel's shape shrank into the trees. Only when I was sure I was alone did I look back. The neon sign that earlier said vacancy now flickered a different message. Letters I hadn't noticed before glowed below. Stay, not take any room, not welcome. Just stay, like a command. A sick pulse of blue light. I turned and kept walking, shaking so hard I nearly fell. The highway should have led me back to my car, but somehow the road seemed wrong now, dipping and turning in ways I didn't remember. I didn't reach my car again until well past dawn. Dried leaves stuck to my clothes like I'd been lying on the forest floor. The engine started first try, like nothing had ever been wrong. I drove non-stop, not daring once to check behind me. Not until I spotted other cars and gas stations did I even breathe right again. I told myself I'd imagined it. Stress, exhaustion, hallucination from hunger. But last week, curiosity got the better of me. I tried to look up that motel, the town, anything. Nothing. No listings. No history. No record of it ever existing. And my phone, the night after I left, finally synced all the messages I'd tried to send. Most were blank because I'd been too panicked to type properly. But one stood out, time-stamped from around 1:07 a.m., right when the door opened. It was a single message to a number I didn't recognize. Just one word. Help, but the word wasn't typed. It was distorted, jagged, as if my fingers hadn't written it, but something else had pushed them. I've tried since then to convince myself that fear rewrites memories, that maybe I did see a staff member. Maybe the sign always said stay. Maybe that place was just another relic of the mountains, swallowed by time. But every night, every single night, just as I'm drifting to sleep, I hear a door opening slowly in my hallway and footsteps approaching room by room by room, checking, listening, waiting for mine.